Today I'm making easy vegan tortillas. To make these really simple tortillas, you're going to need some flour, and I'm going to be using King Arthur all-purpose organic flour today, 2 cups, which is about 240 grams. Let me get that out. And before anybody freaks out, because I always say white flour, white foods in general are bad, let me just explain. The difference from white flour to whole wheat flour really is a few grams of fiber for the most part. And to me, you're adding so much other stuff to the food itself that couple grams of fiber isn't a big deal. However, I have not been able to successfully make a good tortilla using whole wheat flour. And yes, I have tried using this exact method. That's about 2 cups. This is gonna make quite a few tortillas, like 8 to 10 tortillas. I am making enchiladas tonight using some of the leftover crab that Derica made the other day. That recipe will be coming another day. But anyway, that's 240 grams of flour, which is also 2 cups. And then I have here a full cup of water. Now, I don't expect to use the whole cup of water. I generally go with like a 1-to-4 ratio when I use volume, but it's actually about a 50% ratio when it comes to water weight. So this half a cup of water would be 120 grams. A full cup would be 240 grams. So I'm just gonna put in about half the water that I have here. You don't have to be super exactly specific and accurate. You just want to be able to make a nice dough that you can work with. Different flours, different days may require slightly different ingredients. You want to make a pliable dough. Yeah, this is going to take a little bit more water than that. You just put in, a couple tablespoons at a time until you get it mixed together, until it's a dough. All right, looks like today it's gonna take almost all of it. While I'm doing this, I have a cast iron pan on the stove on medium heat. I wanna get that up to pretty hot, about 400 degrees. I am not using any oil to make these tortillas. That is critical. These are extraordinarily low in ingredients, you might notice. I don't even put salt in them, and that's a choice. If you really want to put salt in it, feel free. I do it for the blood pressure reasons. I just don't feel it's necessary. We've not had a problem with them not tasting good. However, to up the flavors a little bit, if you want to, you can add a little bit of onion powder, say, I don't know, that's about a half a teaspoon, and some garlic powder, just about the same amount, half a teaspoon or so, maybe that was a full teaspoon. Adds just a little bit of flavor to the dough. Okay, now we have our dough. More or less. Let me get everything out of the way here and dump it out onto the table. Here's where you're gonna get your hands dirty. You wanna work that all in and start the kneading process. Basically, all that dry should get soaked up, and then maybe even a little bit more if it's too wet. It should be soft, but it should be not wet. Like, it shouldn't feel sopping wet here. Notice it's kind of craggy, there's little bits and pieces coming off. That is okay. Just doing a little bit of kneading, trying to get it all to come together. Just for insurance, I am gonna put a little bit more flour out on the table here. We're gonna be rolling it out eventually anyway, so it's all good to have a little bit extra. There, see, it shouldn't be sticking to you or the work surface. That's the idea. And then we knead. Give it, a good 5 minutes of kneading or so. Now, as you knead it, you'll notice that it starts to get less sticky. The dough itself just gets a little firmer. It feels stretchy and springy rather than wet and mushy. If you need to, add more flour. Not a problem. This isn't as scientific as making bread, where you want to be very careful about your ratio of water to flour. This is more about the touch and feel and workability. So you really want to add as much flour and as much water as is necessary to keep this pliable consistency without it being too sticky. You don't want it to stick to your bench. You don't want it to stick to your hands. After a few minutes of kneading, it should look pretty smooth, pliable, plastic, elastic, all that good stuff. This is when I will get more flour. Just kind of dust the work surface, if you will. And we're gonna start sectioning. I'm probably gonna get 8 out of this, maybe more, but 8 is a starting point. So I'm gonna start by cutting it in half. Put that to the side. Then I'll make another log shape out of this one. And I'll cut that in half again. Exact sizes aren't important. Try to be good though. Make logs out of those and cut each of those in half. That's about right. You want like a roughly golf ball sized piece. And then let's cut this one too. It's just an easy trick to get them roughly the same size. You can get a scale out and measure them if you really want to, but you know, I'm just not that worried about the exact weight of it. Get some more flour out. I'm gonna put some of that flour on my rolling pin here because it helps to not stick. Keep in mind, I do have that pan heating up. You wanna get that pan up to like a 400 degrees Fahrenheit or so. Now, if you notice, I'm not using one of those fancy tortilla presses or the not fancy tortilla press. I have them. And I find that for this exact dough, they don't work as well. They work really well for some things, but not for this particular one. I just find working it out more or less by hand like that, and then giving it a quick roll out with the rolling pin. Trying to keep them more or less round-ish. But I find this works much, much better. I'm looking for something fairly thin, like an 1/8 of an inch to a 1/16 of an inch, something like that. You want to try to not get a lot of flour stuck to it. You want as little flour to stick to the actual tortilla as possible, because it's just going to end up in your pan and it's just going to burn. There we go. That's looking pretty good. Maybe I can go just a touch thinner. Okay, and here we are over at the stove. I have my pan here, and I also have one of those fancy tortilla holders. I love these things. This is actually critical to making this work, okay? One of the things that I always had problems with was making with homemade tortillas was they're always a little stiff and crackly. Well, guess what? There's a secret. And as you can see, we're at about 450, 460 degrees. That's a little bit much. Let me turn that down just a touch. But while that's heating like that, we take our tortilla that we just roll out and we just drop that right into the pan. As it sits there, here's what's going to happen. You're going to start seeing little bubbles form in the surface of it, just a little bit. And that's your trick to know when to flip it over. You will see some smoke and steam because there is water in this dough, but we're looking for those tiny little bubbles. Starting to see like right about there. Usually takes anywhere from 30 to 40 seconds before that starts to happen. There we go, starting to form right in that area there. The light is coming in from this side, so I'm trying to not be in the way. Okay, as the bubbles start to do that, that's your cue to flip. So we just kind of get a spatula under it, flip it over, and cook this side. Now you can see all those little bubbles. That's kind of where the steam is starting to escape. It'll do the pita thing sometimes where it inflates and becomes like a balloon. And on the second side is when it gets most of the cooking. I'm gonna cook it for probably 40 seconds to a minute on this side, and I might even flip it back just to get a little bit more browning on the other side again. Now, sometimes they balloon up, sometimes they don't. It's okay if it doesn't, nothing to worry about. Okay, it's been about a minute. Let's take a look, flip it over. So we're starting to get a little bit of browning. That's what we're looking for. It's okay to keep flipping it back and forth. I do that all the time. But you can see the bubbling. Oh, here we go. It's starting to balloon. Just a little bit. Now the problem with ballooning is it'll sometimes raise it off the pan. So what I do is I just take the weight of my spatula and I lay it on there to kind of force the air to go to the sides. And that'll apply a little bit of pressure maybe just to keep it in the pan. But you see that lifting up. That's just the steam escaping, and because we kneaded the dough properly, it's got a great seal, so it's holding all that air in. When it starts doing that though, it's usually pretty well cooked. See that browning? That's what you're looking for. You just want it to be a little bit browned up. We don't want black spots. And basically, that's it. That tortilla is done. I'm gonna put it into the warmer here, which if you notice, I made them just the right size so they fit in there perfectly. Now you see all this excess flour? that's just going to burn. So I tend to wipe that out. Just grab a paper towel and carefully wipe it out. You don't want liquid in here, and I just kind of get it to the side if I can, whatever you got to do. And we're ready for the next one. So I'm going to finish all these off, and I'll be back with you in just a few minutes. Okay, so this tortilla warmer, if you don't have one of these, it's perfectly okay. Just take a couple of towels and wrap your tortillas in there. The idea is you want them to steam. That's the secret. Let me just show you. Here's one that I just made. Now, it feels a little bit dry to the touch. They're very, very hot still. It feels a little bit dry, and it just doesn't feel very flexible. But if I flip these over and get to the one on the bottom, look at that. It just folds over onto itself, very, very flexible. But I'm gonna get these back in here because I don't want the steam to escape. Let them sit for at least half an hour. An hour is better. They'll cool off, and that's okay, but they will fully steam through. The cooking process actually happens more in here than it does in the pan. Okay, so once they've sat for half an hour, what are your options at that point? What can you do with these? Well, I mean, they're tortillas, but they could be treated like a pita or a rota, or any kind of flatbread that you can think of. Sometimes what I do is I don't roll them out quite as thick, and I'll cook them up, and that makes a perfect pita for, Greek style food. But as they are, they make fantastic tacos, burritos, enchiladas, whatever you can think of. You can break them off and dip them into some hummus. You can make a sandwich out of them. You can put any kind of filling you can imagine into these. Trust me, I've done it. They're just that good. Now, if you want to know about the nutrition information for each one, roughly 110 to 115 calories per. There's 0 fat, at least none to be counted. That whole, less than 1 gram thing, but there's really no fat in these. They contain about 1 gram of fiber, so not quite as good as a whole wheat, but a whole wheat might only have 2 or 3 at most. If you can't make up 2 grams of fiber by eating something else, then you're doing it wrong. And they have about 4 grams of protein each. Now, recommended serving for one person is 2, maybe 3 of these. Storage options. What can you do with these? Well, what can't you do? I mean, they're tortillas. You can freeze them if you really want to, but it took me all of 15 minutes to make 8 of them. Pretty sure if I just doubled or tripled the recipe, it would only take me a few more minutes to cook up the rest. So not a big deal. You can store them in the fridge for probably about a week in a zip-top bag. Beyond that, yeah, just freeze them for long-term storage if you really feel the need. Let them come back to temperature on the counter for, an hour or so before you want to use them, and you're good to go. But remember, let them steam. That's the important bit. And as always, guys, thank you so much for watching, and have a great day. Today, I'm making tortillas, vegan style. Today, I'm making easy vegan tortillas.